Dobar dan svima. Hello, everybody. Congratulations for coming, and also thank you for coming under such a harsh conditions. Not very good for intellectual exchanges, but we're gonna make the best of it. Today we have really a special guest, which is Matijas Enar, that many of you already know as a writer, but also as a public speaker. Matijas has been coming quite often to Belgrade, one could say. And also, Matijas has, if I'm not mistaken, even 5 books translated into Serbian.
Yes, more or less. Yes, from the manual for the perfect terrorists until
the last zone,
yes, Michelangelo. Yes, five something like that.
5 books. Yes.
Bussola. No, 6 or 7.
Even 6 or 7. Wow. So Matijas is a household name that already has a really has an audience here, and therefore what we are going to do is first of all to give space to people who make this whole exchanges possible, and those are translators. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. And here with us we have Matijas Enar, translator, who translated your 2 books, isn't it, Tamara? Yes. And also the latest one. And we thought that this will be a rather incomplete discussion if we don't have a translator with us to simply give us an introduction from her point of view into the oeuvre of Matijas Enar.
Thank you, hvala, merci. Ja ću govoriti srpski i daću jedan kraći uvod koji će se prvenstveno ticati i problema u prevođenju, ali ujedno će prikazati lik, ja verujem, Matijasa Enara. Ne bih htela da govorim o njegovom životnom putu, pošto će o tome već biti reči dalje u razgovoru sa Igorom, a ja bih se pre svega osvrnula na 2 prevoda u kojima sam lično učestvovala, odnosno knjigama Bussola, koja je dobila, kao što verovatno mnogi znaju, roman je dobio Gonkurovu nagradu, i drugi najnoviji roman koji je kod nas izašao prošle godine, Godišnja gozba Grobarskog bratstva. Ove 2 knjige mi služe upravo da pokažem tu, da kažem, njegovu širinu, i prva stvar koju bih istakla je ogromna erudicija Matijasa Enara. Ona ide zaista i u širinu i u dubinu, da se tako izrazim. Veoma je intelektualno zahtevno prevoditi pisca kao što je Matijas Enar, i za to ću dati primere, bez obzira da li ste čitali ili niste. Bussola u velikoj meri govori kroz priču o jednom muzikologu koji se interesuje pre svega za Orijent, govori veoma mnogo o samom Orijentu, i kroz to otkriće Orijenta mi pratimo i orijentaliste 19. veka, niz francuskih pisaca ili ne samo francuskih, istraživača, raznih pustolova koji su pohodili taj Orijent i koji istinski taj Orijent obožavaju. Isto tako tu možemo pratiti i razne zanimljive stvari vezane za muziku, za arhitekturu, posebno opet orijentalnu, za istoriju tog Orijenta, a u toj knjizi se skriva i priča o Siriji, koja je u to vreme upravo bila, da kažem, na najvećem udaru, i kroz tu priču o Siriji, odnosno kroz uništenje nekih njenih velikih spomenika, mi naziremo i jednu stalnu političku angažovanost Matijasa Enara, o kojoj verujem da će biti dalje reči. S druge strane, Godišnja gozba, koja je skorijeg datuma, kao što sam rekla, ne samo što je skorijeg datuma, već govori o prvo potpuno francuskoj temi, barem u najvećem delu, iako istovremeno govori o jednoj ideji o selidbi duša, odnosno o našem u suštini večnom životu, zavisno od toga šta smo zaslužili, da li da budemo crvi, psi, ljudi, dobri ili zli, već kako kome dopadne, da kažem. Ali upravo i tu u toj nedavno objavljenoj, za nas nedavno objavljenoj knjizi, postoji niz referenci, zaista jedan splet neverovatnih stvari koje su i za prevođenje veoma teške. Prvo pomenula bih koliko se Matijas Enar sa lakoćom i sa, rekla bih, uživanjem šeta kroz različite epohe francuske istorije. Tako ćete moći tu da pročitate nešto i o ratovima u 16. veku, odnosno onima između katolika i protestanata, ili ćete videti Francusku iz doba Galije, ili ćete pak opet Napoleonove pohode moći da pratite kroz život jedne stenice, život i više manje njenu smrt. Dakle, niz neverovatnih tih istorijskih stvari koje nas, o kojima zaista treba dosta znati, ali koje Matijas Enar tako lagodno provodi kroz tu priču o selidbi duša. Književne aluzije takođe koje Matijas Enar neprestano prepliće kroz svoje delo su zaista fascinantne. One se kreću od antičke književnosti i filozofije, na primer Lukrecije, ili s druge strane imate vrlo upečatljive scene upravo o grobarima koji su jedna od glavnih tema te knjige, vezane za jednu rableovsku francusku tradiciju i čak i za neke konkretno rableove likove koji se iznenada pojavljuju, da kažem, iz prikrajka potpuno neočekivano. Pored toga, pored ove erudicije na kojoj ja insistiram, u stvari vi kod Matijasa Enara pratite i jedno ogromno znanje u najboljem smislu te reči o pravom francuskom duhu i načinu života, što se naročito može videti baš u ovoj poslednjoj knjizi kroz niz aluzija, malo je reći aluzija i nabrajanja i podsjećanja, na primer, na kulinarske sjajne, da kažem, podvige francuske, bilo da su u pitanju vrste jela, vina, sireva i niz drugih, dakle, zaista ovako vrlo ukusnih, da kažem, stvari s jedne strane. S druge strane imate i niz popularnih, recimo popularnih pesama, o tome je Matijas Enar juče govorio kada je predstavio jedan kraći deo svoje knjige. Te popularne pesme služe kao neka vrsta light motiva za određene epizode u samom romanu. I mogla bih mnogo još da pričam o samom romanu, to nije verovatno cilj i zaista treba da dođe vreme da govori onaj koji je sve to napisao. Samo bih pomenula za kraj u vezi sa tom erudicijom s jedne strane i tim pristupom koji je krajnje blizak i francuskom i nekom drugom čitaocu i građaninu, bogatstvo registara u kojima se kreće Matijas Enar kroz svoje knjige. Ako uzmem za primer naročito poslednju knjigu, vi imate taj dijaristički jedan deo posvećen određenoj ličnosti koja se zove David i koja piše svoj takozvani etnografski dnevnik koji se pretvara u stvari u dnevnik njegovih neuspeha, jedan mladi umišljeni čovek koji koristi niz kolokvijalnih izraza i uopšte piše jednim često telegrafskim stilom. To bi bila jedna strana tog njegovog umeća, dok sa druge strane imate zaista razne opise vrlo visokim stilom napisane. Neke od scena sam pomenula kada su u pitanju ti istorijski podsjećanja na istorijske događaje. I da bih završila ovo u potpunosti, da kažem, verno, nadam se barem, Matijasu Enaru, želela bih da istaknem koliko je i sama zvučnost njegove rečenice, jedna rečenica koja onako žubori, koja divno teče. To je jedan inače veliki izazov za prevodioce. Nadam se, na primjer, da je i taj naziv godišnja gozba Grobarskog bratstva donekle u našem jeziku dočarala tu njegovu raznovrsnost, taj naziv para uši gotovo. I na kraju humor, naravno, humor koji se provlači kroz sve što sam rekla, koji sve kroz taj veseli i neobavezne scene pijanih grobara ili kroz naprotiv neke scene potpuno drugog tipa neprestano provejava, što mislim da je upravo dokaz Matijasovog velikog umeća. I za kraj, sam kraj, već sam pretkoračila možda malo, htela bih samo da dam jedan primer tog njegovog humora kada grobari izgovaraju dižući svoju čašu, izvinite, u čast smrti, odnosno završavajući svoju gozbu, oni nižu razne izraze, odnosno pre svega glagole koji ukazuju na smrt. Ja ću dati samo 5, 6, 7 komada, odnosno primjera. Dakle, prvi Sešpin Lorenac, ponosni donosilac jela i veliki majstor grobarskog bratstva, izgovorio je u opštoj tišini ovu jednostavnu reč, smrt. O tome je reč, umreti, svečanu i jednoznačnu, i podigao je svoju neobičnu flašicu za rakiju ispunjenu špiritusom, da bi je zatim ispraznio na eks, ne drhteći, a njegov sused nastavi, skončati i ispiji on. Sledeći je prošaptao, podleći i ispio, zatim onaj posle njega, upokojiti se, onaj s njegove desne strane, izdahnuti, sledeći, ispustiti dušu, čovek posle njega, dodao je, rastati se sa životom, njegov sused, otići na večni počinak. Svi su praznili svoje flašice u dobrom redu, crći i poginuti, ugasiti se. Jedan po jedan grobari su ozbiljno izgovarali neki glagol ili izraz. Nastradati, zatim bi strusili čašicu rakije, krepati, sledeći capnuti, uvek sledeći nadesno i tako dalje, i ovde stajem. Hvala vam.
Hvala, Tamara.
Hvala, Tamara.
Thank you, Tamara, for this really lovely introduction for the Serbian audience into the works of Matijas Enar. Now I suggest that we go into this 101 discussion for half an hour, and then we're going to open up a space for you also to ask questions, and maybe Tamara will have a question at the end for our author. Matijas, I was thinking about, now we know the writer and his books. Yeah, the writer is here with his oeuvre in front of us. But what made the writer? That was my question I was asking myself, and then I was listening to your interviews, and where you were talking about yourself. You are a very, one could say that you never speak too much about yourself. You are really wonderful in giving space to other writers. You also have a very interesting, great radio show at the France Culture that I recommend to everyone who can listen French, where you open up space for contemporary but also classical writers. But anyhow, I managed to find some biographical notes, so that made me thinking about a boy growing up in Western France in the 80s, say mid-80s, and discovering books that gave him the will and kind of taste of travels and other worlds outside of his own. So I found out that for you the most important book was The Trans-Siberian by Blaise Cendrars.
Yes, that's right.
And so you can maybe tell us more about what made you into a writer at this tender age of 11, 12, 13.
Hello everybody. I'm very happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be among friends. Yes, it's true that I don't know exactly when I don't remember when I started to write. You know, it was like a very old bad habit I had since childhood. But I think what's more important than that is that I have always been a reader. Like, I've always read many books. And the story you mentioned is true. When I was 13, I got into a very deep depression, like quite common coming of age teenage depression. And so I couldn't go out of my room for almost a year, or And that I mean, for my mother, it was something very complicated because I said no, I didn't want to do nothing. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do nothing. I want to watch TV. So I don't remember what I did for because that's an incredible, very long amount of time, you know, like that. So many months, and I said, what did I do? Nothing, you know. And but then I think because that was also because I was going out of this depression, and I was getting really deeply bored. I was reading all that time, but I was reading like adventure novels, also many like novels of adventures and stuff like that. But then I got really interested by a very famous French poem from the beginning of the 20th century, which is for us like a turning point into the story of French poetry by poets and novelists called Blaise Cendrars. And he wrote this very long poem, like narrative poem, called The Trans-Siberian Prose, about railway travel between Moscow and the Pacific, well, China, in 1905, during the first Russian Revolution. And I don't know why this poem really fascinated me. It was the rhythm of the train, the very beautiful images about Russia made me dream and made me probably want to see the world and discover. So I got out of my room with At first, I just wanted to read more books from that man, and I only had this poem. So I went directly to the library in my hometown, and I read all that was available from him, and it was always like all travel poems or travel novels, also
Traveling
about
to South America.
Brazil, South America, and it really helped me, you know, that and I think it's a turning point in my life. I don't know it's for my career as a writer very important, but for I think for myself it's really a turning point. And I didn't want what to do with my life. I wanted to study mathematics. I was really in love with math. But if I studied mathematics, then I would go to the university about, I don't know, maybe 50 miles away from my hometown. So that was not quite a big travel. No, it was like going from here to Novi Sad, something like that. So I said, well, so I won't study math. I'll try something else. And I bumped into the catalog of a very famous university in France called Les Langues Orientales, Oriental Languages Studies in Paris. And this booklet was just incredible because it was all descriptions of languages, destinations, starting from, there was at that time, there was like the 3-language diploma for Yugoslavia, you know. For now today, it's like an archaeology to see that. But yes, you could have like a special diploma for all the languages of Yugoslavia, for example. You know? And then it started moving west. You could study Greek, Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Urdu, Hindi, and like this all around the world. So this book was a travel in itself. So I said, no, I want to go and study there. And at first I thought maybe I will study Vietnamese or Chinese, but then I was afraid it was very far away. I'm not so sure I could go that far. So I chose something more closer to home anyway, and was Persian and Arabic.
And you said also that this changed your life. So now we have this moment of discovering the world, but then obviously you are much older. You are going to Paris to study Oriental languages, and that discovery of Arab and Persian language and literature and the world changed you. In what way?
it's difficult to say, but it was first the language in itself and its literature was very much of a huge discovery, because it's like an ocean. You know, when you're a teenager, you don't realize that you know that there's French literature, German, because I studied German at school, and English, but you don't realize that there are many other worlds and very huge worlds in terms of literature. And that was my discovery of Arabic and Persian. And they were. And at the INALCO, we had the possibility to travel right away because there were so many exchanges, student exchanges. So, yes, right away I went to study Arabic in Egypt, Persian in Tehran, and then I moved to Lebanon, Syria.
And we are talking
Tunis.
about the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very important.
The early 90s.
The early 90s. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that was very important because one thing is to study the language from abroad, but when you're there, you can confront your fascination with the reality. You know? And I discovered that I was pretty at ease in those places, that I loved living there, and this mixture of literary fascination and I don't know, love of the day-to-day reality was perfect for me. So I stayed, I don't know, maybe 10 years there, probably between 3, 4, 5 countries, but yes, in the whole.
Rumor has it, I heard in Beirut, that you even got married there.
I got married there. That's right. Yes, that was.
Now
that
you
was,
confirm, okay.
I confirm. Yes, it was not at first. It took time, but yes, I got married in 2000. 2000.
Ah.
Sorry.
And I'm of course mentioning all of this to situate this space that will become yours in a way, and clearly the Balkans also fit into this picture, I guess. On your travels to the Middle East, you had to cross through the Balkans, and how this discovery of the Balkans happened.
Well, it was in '95, and I was very concerned about, as we were in Middle East, about the war in Bosnia. It was for us very close, actually, because so many also not radical at that time, but Arab volunteered into, some of them coming back from Afghanistan, some of them from, well, anywhere from the Arab world, volunteered into Bosnia. So that was much in the news at that time in the Middle East too. And so we were very concerned about Sarajevo and the Sarajevo siege. And literary-wise, I had already read many writers from the former Yugoslavia, or the Yugoslavia that was disappearing at that time. And because I was interested also by the story of the Ottoman Empire and these traces of the Ottoman history that was in the Balkans, and the Persian literature that was written in the Balkans at the time. So that was one of my favorite subjects, because it's beautiful to see how what we think today is the language of Iran and Afghanistan and Tajikistan was a very international cultural language that was written from Indonesia to Sarajevo, you know.
Was the language of literature,
yes,
like
it was
Latin in the, you know?
No, it was not Latin. Latin was Arabic, just to say, because Latin had something to do with religion, and Persian has not. You know, it's only very for poetry, lyrical poetry, but also epics, many things. You know, the Ottoman sultans themselves until the 16th century or before the 16th century, sorry, they wrote themselves poems in Persian, for example. You know, Bayezid was a good poet in Persian. So this story is, you know, the last Persian poet, the last Occidental Persian poet, was Frasheri, the Albanian poet in the 19th century, like the biggest Albanian poet of the 19th century, wrote poems, ghazals, in Persian. For us today, it sounds like, what? So I was fascinated by this story, and so I was very interested in the Balkans and Sarajevo at that time. And of course, it was also very sad because we saw that many of those manuscripts had burned with the beginning of the war, and the Sarajevo library was burned down. So many of its treasures were lost because they were all manuscripts. And then in '95, that was my first visit to Sarajevo when the siege was, at the end of '95, siege was over. At the time of the Dayton agreements, I got the opportunity through, let's call it university exchange thing, through this story of the Persian legacy of the Balkans, to go there first, yes. I did a trip there in Sarajevo, which of course we discovered that there was not much at that time left to see, because it was all chaos, library-wise, I mean. And catalog-wise, they didn't know exactly what was available, where it was, what had burned, what had not. So, and to Bulgaria and also to Istanbul too. So I went through all this area, went through Belgrade, and that was my first visit. It was at the end of '95. That was quite a long time ago now.
But I'm coming, of course, now it's important to know this context to come to your books. You said at a couple of occasions that you did write a couple of novels, one or two, but you said that they were bad novels. For us, it's difficult to imagine that you can write a bad novel. So I hope you didn't burn these manuscripts.
I can.
Yeah.
I assure you that I can write
Yeah.
very bad things too. So.
And
Yes,
what these bad lost novels, lost tapes were about?
They were too sentimental, I was probably too lyrical, were love stories of, I was very young, so probably not worth reading.
But well, who knows? Maybe one day.
One of my first published novel is called La Perfection du Tir, Shooting at Perfection in English. And but the second one is very bad too. It's a horrible book. Yes, Upstream the Orinoco. It's it tells a story of my discovery of Latin American literature and those countries, mostly Colombia and Venezuela. It's about a kind of dreamy atmosphere. It's very bad. So bad that it was turned into a movie. It's there's a movie with Juliette Binoche.
Not bad.
Not bad, because I got to have dinner with Juliette Binoche. Oh. She's really nice. She's amazing. So yes, I can write very bad things if I'm left alone.
So, but now tell us where your novel Zone, the Zone comes in, because obviously it concerns us a lot.
Yes.
It concerns the Balkans, but for you, and this is important for your writing, there's never this type of American thinking about area studies. Oh, Balkan studies. Oh, Eastern Europe. Oh, Arab, MENA, Middle Eastern, Northern Africa. For you, it's all the same zone. And definitely when
you pointed something very interesting, that, at times the scientific organization of our knowledge leaves gaps. And those gaps are exactly what you just said, that what links the Middle East with the Balkans, or the south of the Mediterranean with the East. And because of different colonial powers, for example, it's very separated and segregated in a way. Knowledge about or with Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, for example, with what happens in the Middle East, like Lebanon, Syria, or Iraq. It's two separated different worlds nowadays. Why? Because they had like different colonial powers, different colonial history. And that's when we built our universities at that time, so the knowledge was organized through colonial powers and domination. And it's true that Zone, the novel, is not, because it's about something else. It's about the dark side of this domination story, about spying and warfare and dark, unseen political power. And it's about a character in a train between Milan and Rome, and it's 500 pages, well, a little less, 483. I will tell you why it's important. Pages
Tell them.
on a train between Milan and Rome, okay? And we don't leave, the character is called Francis Servan Mirkovic. He's half Croatian, half French. His mother is Croatian. She's a Croatian pianist and teacher, piano teacher in Paris. And he was born in Paris. He has lived all his life in Paris. And when he was young, when he was 20 years old, in 91, he decided to go to Croatia and fight for the independence of his country. And then he went down to central Bosnia with an extreme right Croatian party and fought there too. I can explain you where I got this character from and this information.
It's a true story.
It's a true story, yes, it's a true story. But then we switch from let's say, a middle-aged Francis Servan later on that became a spy yes, an agent.
Yeah, French Foreign Service.
Yes,
Secret Service.
from French Secret Service, working on the Middle East, about the Middle East and the south of the Middle East. So it joins, let's say, both stories. It's an East Mediterranean novel, we could say. But it's also train rides between Milan and Rome, and that's why it's only 483 pages, because it's one page, 1 kilometer of the train. So we know, if you know there are 300 kilometers from Milan to Bologna, for example, then you open the books at page 300 and you're there. You're in Bologna. Or in Florence, actually. So it has this kind of very, I don't know, reality, from this train ride that allows me to go and travel in time and through time and space, more easily.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to this because there is also obviously an artistic and literary procede, but there is again a political undertones of all of this, because you've been breaking up precisely these frameworks of knowledge, of separating knowledge into the zone, into areas, and again this kind of a mental say a blockade that people have by separating Europe from the Mediterranean. So we don't, it's a Mediterranean, it's a Middle East, it's outside of us, and Europe is somewhere. We were recently together of us, we were in Plovdiv in Bulgaria, and there was this whole sense of Eastern Europe, whereas we were in Plovdiv, Philippopolis, which is just 100 kilometers from the sea, which is the Mediterranean city. And the whole idea that this Mediterranean is somewhere else mentally, so that we don't need to speak about it, it's really something that fascinates me until today. And even from the people from the northern shore of the Mediterranean, they always look towards north and west, less so much towards south. And in your books, you really go against this logic of mental borders in a way.
That's why the book is called Zone. Zone in Greek, it means a belt. And actually, a belt is something, or a zone is something you can draw anywhere. It's just like a kind of circle. You can encircle many things in. Like you can draw a zone, like that would be like South Mediterranean, as I do in my book. It's just a very personal design. Let's say to see, it's maybe probably what I like the most in writing myself, that makes you discover other ways of seeing things. I probably wouldn't have interested myself for the nationalist Croatian or Serbian point of view if it was not through those characters. I would have discarded that as violent, uninteresting, right-wing ideologies. But if you look at them, they have also like their roots and their realities, and you have to consider them into the dawn, because they form. They are very important. They were very important at that time, and they are still very important. They are like very old and very strong forces going from afar. So it is, redefining the zone helps you understand more vividly, probably, those forces as they were at the most violent moment of their existence, which was in the 90s.
Nice. But now, since we are running a bit out of time, we cannot go through certain books because obviously, in a way, you see it, we could say that Matijas Enar is the most international of all contemporary French authors, at least for me, as far as I know. And you would say that he would, simply avoid writing about France until the last novel, the annual banquet, novel, yes. Which goes back to the home region, not only France, but your own home region, and in a way paying a big homage to this region. Although probably it didn't seem to you when you were 13 or 18 as exotic, you now at the tender age of 50-something, you rediscover your, in a way, the roots, so to speak, but obviously in a literary way. I have a question because that relates zone to the current events in France, but I'm going to save it for later on. But maybe just to explain, why did you, after 10 books, decided to go back home?
It was a project I had for a long time. Probably because I've written a lot about the Middle East or Balkans or even Germany, and I wanted to write something about this region because it's very interesting to think that historically wise, it's like nothing happened there. You would think, we know that in 632 there's this very famous date in French history that the Arabs were stopped at the Battle of Poitiers. And Poitiers is like 40 kilometers east from our mountain. So we have this date, and we have some things of the very dark ages of the religious wars, or even before the wars with Britain and the 100-Year War. But that's
not
all.
Even
we
during
don't,
French Revolution, nothing.
No,
because
French Revolution.
Vendée was big, and the battles were in Vendée, but in your region, nothing.
No, nothing. I think no. It's because it's very rural areas, and history has something to do with cities. Even at that time. So I said, no, I want to write something about this region, but I knew that it was two things. It had to be an outsider coming back, and not me talking about my childhood, but someone
who is the outsider? A true foreigner, actually.
A true foreigner, yes, that's right.
Who is he?
David Mazon is an anthropologist.
He's a PhD candidate in anthropology who comes from Paris.
Yes.
Among these exotic savages that he never met and can hardly understand.
Yes, that's it. So that was quite ironic from my part, of course. But then the story, Marcel Proust, probably we resume usually the Recherche du temps perdu, saying Marcel Proust, Marcel, the narrator, becomes a writer. That's you can say it's the travel of La Recherche du temps perdu from the beginning to the end. And in my book, it's David Mazon becomes a peasant. He starts as a very intellectual Parisian anthropologist coming with fear, but also very much learning and writing energy to this place. And he got swallowed by his terrain. You know, he got like
Swamp.
well, yes, he got like swallowed by the swamps and the locals, and he at the end he becomes one of them. He doesn't want to leave anymore. He just wants to stay there.
And just before I open the floor for the audience, the political question comes in. So in a zone, what we have, and zone was published, was it 2008? Was it something like that? Okay, so 16 years ago. So the main character who goes from France to fight in Croatian army during the war, and he goes also to Vukovar, but then also to Bosnia,
Yes.
and so on. He joins the extremists, the most far-right fascist militias, but he's also product of the Croatian emigre far-right family. And he also is a part of the Front National, of the French extreme right.
Right.
And later on, as is the case with many people, unfortunately, in these echelons of secret services, but also army and police, that are openly or secretly far right. That he joins then the institutions, and that obviously there was this current, as you say, many of us usually don't want to know about these people, don't want to know about their questions they ask themselves, their worldview, and also we don't have much opportunities to spend some time with these people. But there was already this type of thinking that you kind of point your finger at. Did you believe back then that was undercurrent, that was marginal in a way in France, but very present in certain circles, that this current would become a dominant, and now we could say a leading political force in France?
Yes and no. Yes, because that was their goal and their aim at that time too. But no, because it's not the same movement. We can say that now inside those movements that called like from the far right galaxy, there are many fights just to see who is gonna win this very huge popular support right now. And what we see is that they are trying to hide away the people who are very important for them in the 90s and until 2005 or 6, something like that. And they want to disguise themselves as acceptable European right-wing party, which is not easy because, they are very, very huge, very nationalist, violent, anti-Semitic, anti-European, xenophobian components there, and above all, anti-European. So for them too, it's complicated to hide this discourse into a point that they can go to the elections and say, no, we love Europe, and we are happy to participate in the European Parliament, which was totally against the discourse 15 years ago. So you don't know, and I'm sure there's like 2, 3, 4 different layers of political candidates, but also political discourses into this far-right galaxy, which is now very powerful. Why? Because I'm not sure that the people who vote for them now vote for xenophobic, anti-European trends. They just think that's a possibility to change. And what they want is the social aspects of their program, not the international or not let's say, the most right-wing ideological nationalist face of it, So right now, I think what is at stake is really a kind of social revolution into France. That's what the people want. And the people who have been abandoned by the left in the north and south part of France are now thinking that the only opportunity for change is with the extreme, with the far right. So but probably not in a ideological way like it was before in the 90s, for example, when they first appear as a party.
Well, now the floor is yours. I'm sure there will be some questions. We open up a lot of subjects, so yes, use this opportunity to ask our author a question or two.
So I was thinking of this opposition between two narratives that you were proposing in relation to La Recherche and your book, no? And it was either you become a writer or you go native, no?
Yes.
That could be the opposition. I was wondering how you felt yourself about that. Like, it sounds like your 10 years in the field made you a writer, but I wonder to what extent you felt the desire or the fear to go native in some way at some point, and whether writing.
I remain native. You know, if you, yes, I think that, you know, identities are in movement. So also our narrative always moving. I don't consider myself like a total outsider. I'm something in between. You know, like we all are. But it's true that for me it happens something quite strange. I had until now I had written all my books in Barcelona, where I live. But now I got this house in the middle of the marshes there in the western part of France, and I go there to write. So I feel myself right now much more like a French writer, very native one, in the middle, stuck with frogs and snails. And unfortunately, I don't eat snails because, you know, it's a resource you have there, but there are so many snails. I wish I'd ate them, but I don't. So I'm part native, part, because, you know, I lived 30 years. Well, for 30 years something, I lived abroad. You know, I wasn't living in France, so I'm kind of spent more time outside France than inside. And now to go back is this strange sensation that of course I enjoy the language, I enjoy the people, I enjoy the place and so on. But I cannot help think myself a bit of an outsider too. So I'm between the two.
I'm an occasional reader, but from reading Orhan Pamuk and from traveling in Far East, Europe, North America, I see that cultures can be spread in different ways. You say that people on the same territory with similar history share a culture. Some cultures are transported with religion. Some cultures are transported through military conquest. You know, Japan and Philippines are amazingly Americanized, even though they have very late contact with Chinese culture spread throughout the East Asia, mostly through trade and practical things. Please compare these various means of exporting and importing culture.
It's a very interesting question, but it's very wide a scope to probably discuss it like this, but it's very interesting because, you know, I can talk about, for example, what happened in the Middle East and those parts of the former Ottoman Empire, those Arabic countries like Syria and Lebanon, for example, were really culturally under attack from Europe since the 16th century. You know, that's very interesting. The Catholics, the Roman Catholics, tried to enter those countries to have strongholds there, and they succeeded quite well in that because the Maronites, without these Arabic Christians from the Mount Lebanon, They were in communion with Rome since the 16th century. That means that the Catholic bypassed the Patriarchate of Constantinople and Istanbul just to establish their old stronghold in a mountain where no one could see them, and they were very strong. So those are very interesting layers of culture, that you see from one place to another. And when you research that, you know that with the Catholics, what came? Print and books. And the first books printed in the Middle East were through those Catholic Christians who arrived with the whole machinery to print books because of propaganda. They printed their Bibles, and because the tradition in the Middle East at that time was not printed, it was manuscripts. And the Arabic literature started to print also, let's say, more secular books. So this invention, this coming of those Catholics through the mountains. So it was very important at that time because it's a kind of liberation for the secular Arabic literature too, which first books were printed either there in Lebanon or in France, actually. So it's always through culture, it's true, through religion, but also through technical things. Like, yes, cultural technical inventions, like we notice now with the internet, it's the same, it's a kind of a Trojan horse for many things that go with it. And so was the printing machines at that time. So it's just an example of how those things work.
We have a question there.
My name is Milan Milošević, and I wish you pleasant stay in our
Thank
capital.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, could you tell us something more about the role of history in your authorship regarding French history, Oriental history, universal history, and the kind of inspiration that you are finding in that field of study?
History, for me, is very interesting. It's a very important narratives. Not only facts or places, but also characters and stories. When I was writing the book we were talking about, Zone, I did many interviews with many people, and they told me many stories of war stories. Many people from Iran, for example, soldiers who had fought in the war between Iran and Iraq, or soldiers who had been in militias in Lebanon, for example, or soldiers who had fought here, Serbian, Croats, and Bosnian people. But what interested me was not if their story were real or not, if it was history, so to say, or what interested me was their narratives, what they told me. And I mixed them afterwards. For example, in the book, you have a story that comes from Iran, from an Iranian soldier that appears told, or as it was in Bosnia, for example. Because at the end, in warfare, there's something that's very similar. What counts is the experience of the fighter and the fear and the violence you exert among others. And so in that way, what really matters for me, for my writing, is not as much history as the people who tell me stories. Of course, it's historical because it comes from the past, but this material I put into motion, let's say, in a novel, is much more what it tells of characters and human beings, more than the historical past, I'd say. You're welcome.
Any other question or comments? Here it is.
Hello, my name is Alicia. I'm from Poland, and I'm not your reader yet, but I just checked there is one book translated to Polish, which is
Yes. I don't know.
the
Well, at least
compass.
one.
The
Okay.
compass, yes, it's translated. But I have a question about your characters, because as I understand, you write about people who are often very different than you and have a different experience than your own. And I'm wondering, like, how do you make a research? I heard that you hear the stories that people share with you and so on, but how do you deal with the question of sharing someone's story and giving their voice, but just being you as an author? And do you have doubts? Are you questioning yourself about this? Creating people who are very different than you. What is the process?
No, I see that this question is very, very important right now. I think many people ask about that. Like, how do you also write with the voice of others? Like, you're imposing your own one and from others. I don't mind about that at all. It's I tell you why. It's because everybody that reads my book, for example, knows that I am a French white man. My age is in the back. I'm 51 years old. 51, yes. And so there's no cheating about that. You know exactly who is talking. It's me. But then I try to respect let's say, when I say I mixed, for example, different stories, what remains for me is the energy and the core of the experience. I try to transmit that and not to betray those voices. So what's really important is the kind of moral responsibility that is mine, that I try to put into the novel through the characters that I write about. But also, of course it's biased, because I am who I am, but this bias is let's say it's out in the open. You know it. It's a novel. That's the first bias, because it's fiction, so it's not on the same. Let's say it doesn't work the same way that history does, for example. And then that it's written by me, so it's doubly biased, because I'm French. I come from French history, from French vision of literature, and yes, all characteristics that are written on the book. So I think it's how you should see it now. If you accept to read the book, then you accept those conditions, I'd say.
So maybe Tamara, maybe you would like to ask your writer something. It's like at a wedding, speak now or never. Tell him, write more.
I think a
writing.
lot about translators. When I write, I say, "Oh, this is gonna be a tough one." And yes, because
I mean, you are a difficult writer to translate, yes. And again, congratulations to your great and brave translator.
We have a new one.
New one.
The next year.
Oh, very good. Very good. Don't. Aha.
Izvinite, ja sam zaboravila. Rekla sam samo da imamo novi roman iduće godine, će izaći.
Something to look forward.
Novi prevod, to jest, posljednjeg romana Matijasa Enara, zove se Dezerte. Još ćemo vidjeti kako će biti. Radni naslov Dezertirati. Tako da on nas vodi delimično u Prvi svetski rat, a delimično u našu savremenost i događa se, da kažem, u najširem smislu u Evropi, bez daljih otkrića. A jedan od takozvanih loših romana Matijasa Enara prevodi neki drugi prevodilac, tako da će naša publika takođe moći da se uveri da li je on zaista loš.
Great. So very soon, let's hope to complete your works, and also let's hope that you will visit us already next year. Thank you, Matijas Enar.
No, thank you all for being here. Thank you.
da li se čujem? Da. Evo, samo da vas pozovem da se ne raspete, mislim da ima smisla da ostanete ovde. Tu je ukrajinski ambasador sa kojim ćemo zajedno za koji minut otvoriti ovu izložbu koja je posvećena fotografijama sa naša 3 humanitarna putovanja u Ukrajinu. Nakon toga ćemo prikazati kratki film Ukradena deca Ukrajine. Ovde on traje 19 minuta i posle toga u 14:30 ja i Andrej Ljupka ćemo voditi razgovor jednočasovni koji će se